It was a crisp morning on Stephen Seagal's estate. Birds chirped, the sun shone, and Stephen, in his usual black leather jacket and tinted sunglasses, decided to take a contemplative stroll. He wasn't 2 steps into his journey when, squish, his designer combat boots landed squarely in a pile of dog poo. Stephen froze. He looked down in horror at the smelly brown smear across his boot. "This," he growled, "is a declaration of war." Determined to find the culprit, Stephen followed the poo trail through his neighborhood like a grizzled detective. It wasn't long before he spotted the offender, a scruffy golden retriever happily trotting down the street with its tail wagging. "There you are," Stephen muttered, narrowing his eyes. "You think you can disrespect me? Steven Seagal, big mistake." Instead of confronting the dog immediately, Stephen decided on a more elaborate plan. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and in a plastic bag. Stephen began tailing the dog, which he named Pooh Bandit in his mind. Each morning, he observed its routine: a lap around the park, a sniff of the fire hydrant, and a proud strut down the main sidewalk. "This is where it ends," Stephen whispered to himself, crouched behind a bush with a plastic bag of his own. Ammo. The next morning, Stephen placed the bag squarely in the dog's path. He watched from the shadows, anticipating the sweet victory of his prank. Just as the dog approached, a figure emerged from the other side of the sidewalk: Chuck Norris, dressed in a denim vest and cowboy boots, walking with the confidence of a man who had roundhouse kicked his way through life. Stephen's eyes widened in horror. "No, no, no," he whispered. But it was too late. Chuck stepped directly onto the bag, unleashing a squelch that echoed through the quiet street. Chuck looked down, then looked up. His piercing eyes locked onto Stephen, who was hiding poorly behind a lamppost. "Seagal!" Chuck barked. Stephen stepped out sheepishly, attempting to adjust his sunglasses like nothing was wrong. "Hey, Chuck! Fancy meeting you here." Chuck held up his boot, now smeared with the unfortunate contents of the bag. "Care to explain this?" Stephen stammered. "Well, you see, there was this dog, and—" Chuck raised a hand to cut him off. "Stop. Let me guess. You stepped in poo, got mad, and thought this was a good way to get back at a dog?" Stephen nodded slowly. Chuck sighed deeply. "You're an idiot, Seagal. A bag of poo? Really? That's amateur hour." Stephen frowned. "What would you have done?" Chuck crossed his arms. "Simple. I would have talked to the dog, established mutual respect, and maybe taught it some martial arts discipline." Stephen blinked. "You'd teach a dog martial arts?" Chuck leaned in, his voice a low growl. "Stephen, I am martial arts. Even dogs listen to me." Chuck turned and walked away, leaving Stephen to clean up the mess. As Stephen crouched down to remove the bag, the golden retriever trotted up, wagged its tail, and licked his face. Stephen sighed, defeated. "All right, Pooh Bandit, truce, but this doesn't mean we're friends." From that day on, Stephen avoided elaborate revenge plots and carried an extra pair of shoes just in case. And the golden retriever? It became a local hero for teaching Steven Seagal a lesson in humility.